Hello everybody, Gisele Grenier here. Today's lesson is not going to be a harsh critique on a book, but it's going to be an example of creating color mixes from a book telling you how to create the color mixes. And so this was inspired by one of my students who basically told me about this book, and she specifically one page she wanted to learn to paint dark skin tones. After I looked at she took a picture of the page and she sent it to me, and I just kind of shook my head thinking, what a way to confuse somebody by the way that these were made up, and it's based on recipes. So, and again, I don't want to criticize a book. I'm not going to tell you what book it is. All I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the actual color mixes, the way that this book says to do dark skin tones. And the reason why I'm not going to critique it is because not because I'm afraid of backlash. I don't care about backlash, freedom of speech. But the way that the book teaches about making color mixes may work for some people. It doesn't work for me. But what I want to do is I'm going to show you the color mixes for dark skin tones specifically for the student, which, by the way, thank you for reaching out. And so then we'll see where it goes, and I'm going to compare it to my chart, which is much more simple. So we'll go down to the palette, and the colors that I specifically have out here are the colors that my student is using. So she has the Premium Acrylics, and she's got Ultramarine Blue, Quinacridone Violet, Cad Red Hue, Cad Orange Hue, Yellow Oxide, Burnt Sienna, Carbon Black, Titanium White, and then I'm adding Extender. And what I did is I prepared my DIY Stay Wet palette here because I want to do my color mixes here. And what I did is, so I folded the paper towel into thirds, I put some Extender on the bottom, then put the paint on top, then just a light mist of water at the top because of the studio lights. We're stuck with alizarin crimson because this book says to use alizarin crimson, and it's not available in the Premium Acrylics, so we're going to create that with Cad Red Hue and Quinacridone Violet. My student doesn't have Burnt Umber, so we're going to use Burnt Sienna and Ultramarine Blue to create Burnt Umber. And I think it's really that's about it. Yeah, that's about it. Okay, so these are the colors she's using. She sent me this picture of the recipes. I wrote them down. So ideally, we create a master, then there's these recipes all listed here. And what it says, and just like for one of them is you create your master skin tone, then you take one recipe number 11, one speck of master recipe. Then you take one recipe number 11 and then one of the master recipe. Then you take one recipe of number 11, one master recipe, two specks of alizarin crimson, and then just another recipe. This is the one that really got me. One recipe of number 11, one master recipe, three specks of alizarin crimson, two specks of recipe number 12. That may work for some people. It doesn't work for me, and it doesn't work for my students. So I'm just going to show her how I would come about with this, creating these mixtures, and then show my palette or my color chart, which is much more simple. All right, so I've got my colors here. I've got my little round brush. Let's create this master first. So the actual master recipe is 2 burnt sienna, 2 cad orange, 1 yellow ochre, 1 burnt umber. Okay, so she doesn't have burnt umber. So I create burnt umber using 2 parts burnt sienna, 1 part ultramarine blue, and it ranges depending on the brand that you have. Okay, so we're going to take right here, and we need to make a lot of this. I should use my palette knife actually. So I'm going to take 3 parts of burnt sienna. And let's take 2 parts of the Cad Orange, 1 part of the Yellow Oxide, oh that may be a bit much, and half of Ultramarine Blue. Let's see what that does. The reason why I know why my student, I hate to say my student, she didn't want to be named. This is way too light, so I'm going to put some more blue in there. Is committing these to memory super hard. I can tell you right now, super hard committing these to memory. All right, so we come up with this. So there's our master mix. So let's just put our master mix right here. Actually, I'm going to make the chart really this way, but it'd be a bit harder on camera. And because this is dark, what do we always want to do to check the true underline color? We add white. And I'm going to compare my chart at the very end, okay? I'm going to do the same thing as I always do when cleaning the brush. Blot in a paper towel, rinse in bucket number 1, blot in the paper towel, then rinse in bucket number 2 to make sure we always have a clean brush. So the first mixture they go through is the light mixture. And their light mixture, let's see, is 1 recipe of number 11. And number 11 is 1 part white, 1 yellow ochre, and 1 cad orange. And then 1 speck of master recipe. Okay. Well, let's create this mix. So 1 white and 1 yellow ochre. And it's yellow oxide in DecoArt and 1 cad orange. Now, what I don't know on this page is the cad orange. Is it a pure cad orange, like the actual cadmium, or is it a hue? I'm using a hue because true cad orange is toxic if handled incorrectly. Let's create this. And in the book, it also says that the mixes must match what's in the book. You will never get that. You know why? Because books are printed on a printing press using inks and stuff like that. So it's going to look different. So this is the light. So this is recipe number 11. And to that we add a speck of the master recipe. Okay, well, is that a speck? Let's try that. Okay, well, let's see what happens. I'm gonna make this nice and big. Okay. So actually, let me number these. So I'm going to say that this is the master, and then this is, so that's number 1, and then this is number 2. And we blot the brush and clean. Now again, I'm not criticizing the book, but, let's get this out of the way, make some more room. I'm not criticizing the book, I guess I'm just showing an alternative way of doing something. All right, so the next light recipe is 1 recipe of number 11 and 1 master recipe. Well, the recipe number 11 is what we just made, and then equal parts. Okay, well, let's take this over here, and let's roughly take an equal amount. Does that look about right? And let's put that right here. I should have made a little bit more paint. All right, so that takes care of that. Now, in this particular, I almost put this in my coffee. In this particular book, it doesn't, on this page, there's a whole bunch of pages to it. It doesn't go through, the thing of the value scales. What I like to do is with all the colors, it's create a value scale. But I'm going to follow exactly what the page has, so I'm not going to change that. Sorry, this is number 2. Let's write it here. This is number 2. This is number 3. This is number 1. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. So the next light value is 1 recipe of number 11, which is this. So let me write this, 11. 1 master recipe. This is the master. And 2 specks of alizarin crimson. Uh-oh, we don't have alizarin crimson, so we're going to have to make it. So let's take our Cad Red Hue. And the other thing too is they're calling for alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, burnt umber, cad orange. I don't know which cad orange you're using. Cadmium vermilion. I have no idea what that is. I think it's a red orange. Ivory black. I'm using carbon black. Titanium white, ultramarine blue, and yellow ochre. I'm using yellow oxide. And then a little bit of the Quinacridone violet. So this isn't going to be an exact match because we're making up our alizarin crimson, which, by the way, alizarin crimson you should not be using in the pure form because it's fugitive. All right, so let's blot the brush. I probably should have did this after. One recipe of number 11, which is this, and which I'm run out of. One recipe of number 11. Let's make up a little bit more. Okay, we ran out, so we have to take one white, one yellow ochre, one white, one yellow ochre, and one cad orange. Sorry about that tiny break. Somebody started to bark. All right, so now where were we? Where were we? Okay, so we're creating, so I have to make some more of this up. So it's one master recipe of 11 and one recipe. Okay, so let's do that. And let's take, is that about the same amount? Okay. That looks kind of dark, or kind of light. And then 2 specks of alizarin crimson. Well, I don't know about you, but that doesn't look very dark. Okay, so let's try that. Okay, and that's number 4. All right, that takes care of that. So that's, the lights are done. So let me move that. So the medium now. One recipe number 11, one master recipe, 3 specks of alizarin crimson, 2 specks of recipe number 12. Okay, one recipe number 11, which is that, and one master recipe of that, which we're now running out of. 3 specks of alizarin crimson, which is that, and then 2 specks of recipe number 12, which is 2 burnt sienna, 1 burnt umber. All right. You know what? It would just be easier if I just made up the paint fresh. So one recipe number 11. Okay, so that's that. We have that. One master recipe. I don't think I'm going to have enough. Okay. 3 specks of alizarin crimson. Okay. 2 specks of recipe number 12, which is 2 burnt sienna, 1 burnt umber. We don't have burnt umber, so it's going to be 3 burnt sienna and half ultramarine blue. And it's specks. Okay, so let's just make our makeshift burnt umber first. And 2 specks. Okay, well, let's see what happens, because I don't think that's going to be enough. No way, this is not even close to being right. Not even close. All right, so we have to make some more of this master skin tone recipe. Actually, let me make it over here. 2 burnt sienna. 2 cad orange. 1 yellow ochre. 1 burnt umber, which we don't have, so it's going to be 2 burnt sienna and 1 ultramarine blue. All right. So you see how this can be confusing? And I'm just reading it from the actual page. So let's go back. So, 1 master recipe. Okay. 1 recipe of number 11, which is 1 white. Is it equal parts? Yeah, equal parts. So 1 white, 1 yellow oxide, and 1 cad orange. So that's roughly equal parts. Bring that in there. And then 2 specks of alizarin crimson. And then 2 specks of recipe number 12, which is 2 burnt sienna, 1 burnt umber. We don't have burnt umber, so we're going to take 1, 2, 3, ultramarine blue. Oh, I had to do a lot more of a spec on that. All right. All right, so that's 5. This is exhausting. Okay, so the next one is 1 recipe number 5 and 1 recipe number 7. Okay, 1 recipe number 5 was what we just made. Then 1 recipe number 7. So 1 recipe of number 5, which is this, and 1 recipe of number 7. Recipe number 7 is 1 of the master recipe and 1 burnt sienna. Okay, so we have that. So now I have to take recipe number 7 is 1 master recipe, an equal part of that. Does that look about right? And 1 burnt sienna. All right. Matching it to the page. Okay. We're just going to say number 6. And the next one is 1 master recipe and 1 burnt sienna. Let's just take that and 1 burnt sienna. And I didn't clean my brush. If anything, I thought that would for sure have made it darker. 1 master recipe and 1 burnt sienna. I thought for sure that would have been darker because of the other stuff in my brush. All right. 7. Now the dark. The dark is 1 master recipe and 1 recipe of number 14. And number 14 is made up with 2 white, 1 ultramarine blue. So we have to measure about there. Then 1 alizarin crimson, which we don't have, and we were making alizarin crimson with that and that. And it's equal parts. So does that look about right to a 1? Okay, let's mix that. Oops. So let's go back. So it's 1 of the master recipe and 1 of recipe number 14. Blot the excess out of there. Holy moly. Okay, I'll put that right here. And this is recipe. This is number 8. The next one is 1 master recipe, 1 recipe of number 12, and 1 recipe of number 14. One master recipe. Running out of room. 1 recipe of number 12, which is 2 burnt sienna, 1 burnt umber, which I believe is that, but you know what, let's just make up another one. 2 burnt sienna, 2 burnt sienna, and then 1 burnt umber, which we don't have, so burnt umber is made with 2 burnt sienna and 1 ultramarine blue, This part's not the fault of the book. It's just because we don't have the, my student doesn't have burnt umber. I'm doing exactly what she's got. Okay, so let's go back to the recipe. One master recipe. One recipe of number 12, which is 2 burnt sienna, 1 burnt umber. 1. And then 1 speck of recipe number 14, which is this. A speck? A speck, okay. And if you're a member of the studio, you can get all the color charts templates in the website. Okay. And this is number 9. And number 10 is 2 of the master recipe, 2 of the master recipe, and 1 recipe of number 13. That one's new. 2 of the master recipe. So I'm going to use this pile here. And 1 recipe of number 13. 2 black and 1 cad vermilion, which I have no idea what that is, so I'm assuming it's a reddish orange. Okay, 2 of this. Okay, not much left. 2 black, so I'm thinking just 1, 2 black, and 1 of the red. That's too much red. I know what they're doing is they just want to gray it down. Is that gray? So you don't know if it's gray until you add white to see the true underlying color, but that's not what's in the book, so let's just do it this way. Okay. 10. Then there's highlight value, warm shadow, cool shadow, and grain color, which we've already done. The grain color is this. 4 colors, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Oh, let me just put it here. And my squares will not be even. Oh no. I'm not making any more of this paint up. Not happening. And then 2 black, 1 red. You know what? We're done. So let me just 2 black, 1 red. I'm just making this up on the side. You know what? I have to add white to that to see the true underlying color. Sorry. I just gotta. Right. And then the next one is the warm shadow, 2 burnt sienna, 1 burnt umber. I'm just going to make that up on the side. 2 burnt sienna, 1 burnt umber. So it's going to be so hang on a second. 2 burnt sienna, 1 burnt umber. So it's going to be 3 burnt sienna, 4 burnt sienna, 1 burnt umber, 1 ultramarine blue, I should say. Let's see if that works. Yep, that's all right. Oh, I boo-booed that up. That should have been right beside. The unfortunate thing is because student doesn't have burnt umber, is that using the 2 burnt sienna and 1 ultramarine blue to make your burnt umber, it's going to be a little bit more transparent. This is the gray in color. This is what they have written down. And cool shadow. And this is warm shadow. And this is highlight value. All right. Highlight value is wonder if I can bring this over so you can see what I'm doing here. Highlight value is 1 white, 1 yellow ochre, I have yellow oxide, 1 cad orange. Put a bit more white in there. Okay. I don't know about you, but I would never highlight with that. That is really bright. Wow. Holy moly. All right. I'm going to add a bit more white to that. Okay. Let me add a bit more white to that shadow color, which is supposed to be warm. All right. This is recipe number 11, 12, 13, and 14. Explain to me how you're supposed to commit those types of colors to memory. Seriously. Just to get this. Okay. Again, it might work for some people. Definitely not for me. What I did is the colors that we used to make this, I mapped it on my color chart. Okay, so exactly where they sit on the color wheel. Where this is for dark skin tones. And so this is the color chart that I basically work with, and this is more experimental. All these extras. There's really only one reddish skin tone and one greenish skin tone, but I was experimenting using colors in case people didn't have them. So if we look here, okay, well this master number 1, which is made with 2 burnt sienna, 2 cad orange, 1 yellow ochre, 1 burnt umber. How about just taking raw umber, burnt sienna, and raw sienna? How about that? Number 8. Where's number 8? Number 8 is not replicated. Number 8 is 1 master recipe and 1 recipe number 14. So it's 2 burnt sienna, 2 cad orange, 1 yellow ochre, 1 burnt umber, then 2 white, 1 ultramarine blue, and 1 alizarin crimson. Well, how about looking at this being a dark grade value? We really could take, if it's a grade value, we could take raw sienna, carbon black, and white, and then add a touch of the reddish mixture, or add a touch of alizarin crimson. Number 9, I can see that right here. Raw umber, burnt sienna, yellow oxide. Instead of 1 master recipe, 1 recipe 12, 1 speck of recipe 14. So you're taking 2 burnt sienna, 2 cad orange, 1 yellow ochre, 1 burnt umber, then recipe number 12, 2 burnt sienna, 1 burnt umber, and 2 white, 1 ultramarine blue, and 1 alizarin crimson. You can do the same thing with just raw umber, burnt sienna, yellow oxide. Number 10, I'm looking at that here, which it looks like it's a little bit more on the burnt umber side. It's 2 of the master recipe and 1 recipe number 13 with black. So it's made with 4 burnt sienna, 4 cad orange, 2 yellow oxide, 2 burnt umber, 2 black, and 1 cad vermilion. I would say this one here, I would say raw umber, raw sienna, and lighten with yellow oxide, and then add a touch of red to that, which we already have on our palette. Okay. We don't even use that. Okay, so let's go over, so we could... Okay, so that one's not too bad, just getting a lighter value. So their recipe is 1 recipe 11, 1 speck of master recipe. So 1 white, 1 yellow ochre, 1 cad orange, and a speck of the recipe made up by 2 burnt sienna, 2 cad orange, 1 yellow ochre, 1 burnt umber. I made it simply with titanium white, darkened with a little bit of yellow oxide and naphtha red light. 3 paints. And then number 3. How's that? That's... I want to get that chart into the... Probably should have made a little bit... Yeah, I'm thinking right about here. Somewhere in here. Number 3 is made up with 1 recipe of number 11, which is 1 white, 1 yellow ochre, 1 cad orange. So it's made up of 1 of that, and then 1 of the master recipe of 2 burnt sienna, 2 cad orange, 1 yellow ochre, 1 burnt umber. Well, if I were to, I'm thinking this is the closest one here, which is titanium white, yellow ochre, and burnt sienna. And I'm thinking it's a little bit browner. Could add a speck of raw umber to that. Yeah, maybe just a speck of raw umber to that, just to darken it just a speck. Because looking up here, it's a bit too orange. Just gray it down a little bit. Okay, so I only use, so if I say titanium white, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and a speck of raw umber, so 4 pigments. Number 4. Number 4 is made up with 1 recipe of number 11, which is 1 white, 1 yellow ochre, 1 cad orange, 1 master recipe, 2 burnt sienna, 2 cad orange, 1 yellow ochre, 1 burnt umber, then 2 specks of alizarin crimson. So I would turn around and just say to use raw umber, yellow oxide, and a speck of alizarin crimson to get that mixture. I don't know about you, but my recipe seems to be a lot easier than that. Anyways, so my student, if you're watching, it's up to you if you want to try it. I wouldn't at this stage of the game because you're still at the beginner level, and I know you want to paint dark skin tones, so I'm your teacher, stick with mine. But experiment. There's nothing reason why you can't experiment. So I would say go through the lesson using mine, because it's just much more simple. By taking these mixtures, and then you can warm them up a little bit by using the red orange. Okay, and the actual orange is not even in the palette because we can make it with Hansa Yellow Medium. But use the Cadmium Red Hue to warm it up a little bit. And yeah, you can use your cad orange to warm it up a little bit, and anything you need to cool down. Raw umber is not in here, but you can make up a raw umber just by going through the color mixing exercise in the studio. But you can add a little bit of black just to neutralize it, so to tone it down. So just use a little bit of black because these are the paints that you have. So for everybody else, I hope this just shows you that there are so many different ways to do color mixing. Don't stick to just one. You try them and you see what works for you. So obviously this particular one here from this book does not work for me. There is no way I could commit these to memory. I don't know of any practical way that you would be able to do this on the fly without actually having the book with you all the time. With this one here, with this chart, eventually when you make up your palette, depending on the skin tones, like this is the warm skin tones, cool skin tones, reddish skin tones, greenish skin tones, cool and warm browns, and so eliminate 4 columns here because I was just experimenting using sap green and then a DIY sap green. You don't even need to do that. And actually, I introduced raw sienna into the mixes so that you can eliminate that. I just want to show you an additional way of doing it because we already have those colors. And once you start making up the mixes, is that you're going to know automatically, because we basically start out with we've got the warm flesh tones here, and they're so simple. You take a yellow-orange neutral and you warm it up a little bit with a red-orange. So yellow ochre, naphtha red light, or raw sienna and naphtha red light with white. So another one is yellow oxide with white, or raw sienna with white. Another one is yellow oxide burnt sienna with white, or raw sienna with burnt sienna with white. You know, the cool tones, you know, raw umber with white, yellow ochre with a bit of black and white, raw sienna with a bit of black and white. You know, it's just much more simple than that. And the process that I'm following, I've gone through the process using John Howard Sandon's process of portrait mixing. I've tried Jerry Arnell's method of mixing. You know, there's all these different ones. And the one that I've followed, the one that really resonates with me is Daniel Green's, because it's the study of, you know, the old master style. And, you know, you really want to complicate it, use black, yellow, and red, and white. Just use that. And that's what a few of the masters used, and he created the most amazing portraits. But anyways, so that's it. So I hope that this kind of gives, it is a long video because just, well, with how complicated those mixes were, just to show you, experiment, try different things and really see what works for you. And if using this book format works for you, then by all means, go ahead and do it. Just, you know, whatever works for you is important, because even my method may not work for you, and that's totally fine. So create your mixes the way you want, commit them to memory, and that way when you start, you know, creating, pre-mixing your palette, you'll be spending less time doing that. You'll be spending more time doing some painting. Just my key is to use a limited palette. So even though these colors that my student is using is still, I would classify within a limited palette, that's all she has. The addition of burnt umber might make it easier using the book method, and maybe an alizarin crimson might be a little bit easier, but it's not made in this brand. So I would just, you can buy another brand if you wanted to, or just mix it up yourself with the Cad Red and the Quinacridone Violet. All right, so I hope this helps, and let me know what you think. Let me know if you've done any color mixing, what way works for you, how you do your color mixes. And if you have charts of your color mixes, I would love to see them, because maybe there's a better way of doing it. I'm sticking with the way that I do it, but other people might get some ideas on some alternatives, and to see if it works for them. Alrighty, so let me know what you think, and don't forget to hop on over to the private Facebook group to post your charts and pictures there, or you can do everything below this video so we can all share and learn from each other. Alright, so I'm going to clean up this mess. I'm going to do something with all this paint, and until I see you in the next tutorial, stay inspired.